All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very exciting topic here for you today, and a wonderful speaker that I'm very excited to bring into the fold with our ACEC Georgia programming. Couple quick things before we get started. If you want to turn your cameras on, you are more than welcome to. And if you have any questions at any point in time during the presentation, you can submit them via the chat at the end of the presentation. Or you can even unmute at the end and ask your questions. But with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. We have Dan Bruder, co-founder and CEO of Blendification. He champions the link between work and life, turning workplaces into catalysts for human potential. He introduced Blendification, a methodology designed to connect company focus and employee focus. This platform comprises 6 AI-driven software applications, enhances strategic planning and personal growth, leading to elevated employee engagement and exceptional organizational performance. Dan has been educating me on a lot of this stuff so far. We've been working together for a few weeks, and he brought this topic to me, and this is one that I was telling him before you guys logged on. This is very near and dear to my heart. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm excited, and I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dan. Then, Dan, thank you so much for being here.
All right, thanks, Chandler. So glad to be here. Couple administrative things here. So we're going to go through a talk here. I'm going to go through some slides, talk about this concept around work-life blend. To follow along here, you can follow along on the slides, but I've also created a worksheet there, and you can see that in the left-hand side of your panel there. You can click on that QR code or use that QR code and get the worksheet. That will take it to your phone, and your phone won't give you the ability to write in that PDF. If you actually are on your computer and want to follow there's a link there with the HTTPS, and it is a writable, really just it has a few questions that you can follow along the way. So I'll go ahead and take you through this presentation type webinar format. At the end, we'll open it up for questions. If you have questions during, like Chandler said, just go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we will table those and address those at the end. So with that said, we'll get going here. We're going to have a little bit of fun, and we're going to start off by asking a very simple question, I hope. And the question is basically, do you have integrity? Do you have integrity? Think about that for a second. And as you're thinking about that, I want to make it even harder and ask the question, does your company have integrity? So those are 2 questions, and those happen to be the first 2 questions on the worksheet. So if you could, hopefully you can remember these answers, but if you can't remember them, you can go and answer question 1 and check the box yes or no, or question 2, yes or no, in that worksheet. And first question obviously is, do you have integrity? And the second one, does your company have integrity? So this idea of integrity is important. So this word, so if integrity is so important, we should really spend some time understanding what it is. Now, I did a little bit of research, and the word integrity is extremely important in the business world because over 70%, I think it's in the neighborhood of 75% of organizations, companies have integrity as a core value. So if 75% of companies in this country believe that as an integrity is so important, they're going to call it out as a core value. We should spend some time understanding what this word integrity means. So as we do this, we're going to go through a process and talk about integrity. But before we do that, I'm going to share a quick little video that goes through integrity.
Whoa, dude. You thinking what I'm thinking? Yo, I'm gonna cut the gap. Yeah. Dude, I'm gonna get it. I'm going in. We love the work and nothing all day. And we be taking care of business. It's all mine. Integrity. Pass it on. Save the date. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
All right, probably not what you were thinking. If we were live, I would hear some people smiling, giggling, or laughing, or making comments. But we're not in person, so I hopefully you're doing that, and I just can't hear you because you got me on mute. If anybody did want to unmute at any time, that's perfectly fine too. And if you wanted to take yourself off, hiding your screen, that's fine too, because I am certain that nobody else is looking at their email or doing anything else because you're so interested in this word integrity and understanding what's behind it. If we look at the word integrity, where does it come from? If it's that important, where does this word originate from? And it originates from the word integritas. And integritas means wholeness, soundness, completeness. So this is a little different because if we were to say what is integrity, most of us would answer by saying, well, it's just doing what we said we were going to do, or being honesty. While it is that, the origin of the word is actually not exactly what we think it is today. It's not just being honest. There's an element of honesty in it, but really it's about wholeness, soundness, completeness. And then we move on. As the word had evolved, it evolved into integer. That's another root word of this word integrity, integer. Now, when I hear the word integer, I think of third grade division. When I first learned that whole numbers, whole numbers are only divisible by themselves. They can't be separated. So this kind of makes sense with this idea of wholeness, soundness, completeness. And then if we look at it from a numerical perspective, and I assume most of you are engineers, you think in quantitative terms. Integer is really a whole number, can't be divided. So let's take it a step further and look at the word integrated. Now, all of these are all kind of evolving from the same root word, integritas, integrated, and that obviously means that things are working together. And this comes to build this word integrity. So now let's go back to the organization. When the organization says that integrity is a core value, do they mean that as a company that operates with integrity, that we are operating with completeness, wholeness, soundness, that we can't be divided, we're all connected, we're aligned, we're focused? Or are they thinking of integrity of let's just do the right thing? And I would argue that most people think of integrity as just being of doing the right thing, but really the word integrity is focused more on this idea of not being divided, coming together, working together, being one, integrated. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So when we land this plane, when we land this conversation today, these are the 3 points we're going to hit on over the next, several minutes here. First, the problem. Generally, we lack a life of integrity. Now, I don't mean we lack a life of an honesty. We lack a life of being integrated, and I'll get into that here. Wholeness, completeness. The solution is really living a blended life, and the outcome of blending our life, work and life, all aspects of our life, blending them, integrating them, the outcome of that is that we live a more fulfilled life, and that's what we're doing here. So let me start out with a story here. So I got this text at about 4:30 p.m. about a year and a half, or excuse me, about 2.5 years ago. I got this text from my neighbor who I can look right out my window and see his house, but his house was burning, and that is fire on the top. And he sends us over and says, oh no, he didn't actually say that, but for the purpose of this meeting, he said, oh no, my house is on fire. And I wasn't surprised at all because about 3 hours before that, I evacuated. My whole family, we evacuated, and we went down to my daughter's house, which was about 20 minutes from here. But our whole town burned. We had about 1,000 homes burn over the course of 8 hours, and it was the largest natural disaster in the history of the state of Colorado, which is our state. And this is now referred to as the Marshall Fire, and it cleaned out 1,000 homes within about a 3-mile radius of my house. And unfortunately, this house was one that burned. Now, the next day, our whole town was surrounded by the National Guard, and I was able to finagle my way through the barrier they created, and I went back and took a picture, and fortunately the firefighters had gotten to his house and were able to save some of this. So I took a picture and I sent it over to Jason, and I said, hey Jason, this is your house. And he was actually delighted to see that he had a house, because at that point he didn't think he had a house. everything was broken down. Now that was the fire, and obviously it had an impact on our community. But from a life and business perspective, I started looking at this picture, of course, after everything settled down, more like about 90 days later. And I said, you know, there's some correlations or some parallels to how we live our lives here. I look at this picture, and this house was built to be a home. And something came through and ravaged this home and broke away all the pieces. So if you look around on the ground there, there's a bunch of pieces that were once part of this house that are no longer connected to this house. And they individually, those pieces are no longer serving their purpose as being part of this home. And now this house, this structure, this sticks and bricks is no longer realizing its purpose or its potential to house or a family. So what happened is it really just disconnected everything. And when things were disconnected, it no longer served its purpose. And I started thinking about this further, and I said, that's kind of what has happened in the world of business and life. When we become disconnected, and we could say COVID, we could say technology, we can say a lot of things have come through and created a level of disconnection. And when we do this, when we're disconnected, we no longer serve our true purpose when we are connected to what it is we were put on this earth for. And this house is a good example of that. Now you might look at that and say, but it has a strong foundation. And I think that's important. You can build on a strong foundation, but it's not good enough. We not only need a strong foundation, we need to have all of the parts to be connected so that they individually can serve their purpose. So collectively, we can serve our purpose. And that's really what we're going to focus on here. And it goes back to the word integrity, because this house, from an engineering perspective, many of you are thinking this house lacks structural integrity, right? Because the parts aren't connected. And that's kind of like our lives here. So I say that the connection between work and life is broken, and we have some challenges that we need to overcome. And we, everybody on this call, are part of the solution. And we can actually build better integrity in our lives so our lives don't lack structural integrity. But some of you might be saying, well, yeah, we were able to maintain productivity through COVID and everything. And I say, yes, we did. But what we did is we saw that productivity increased. But at the same time productivity increased, we saw a lack of connectivity. So what happened overall is that we gained productivity at the expense of connectivity. And later on, we saw that when we lack connectivity, productivity actually ends up falling. Not only does productivity fall, we also see that our lives start getting more disconnected. We experience more anxiety, more depression, and all of the things that we know statistically that are at the tops that align with high anxiety, depression, loneliness. All of this is a result of connectivity, but we cannot focus just on productivity at the expense of connectivity. So I'm going to bring up another topic here, and it's this idea of balance. And we're so focused on balance, and I think that's a good thing. It served a good purpose. But when we seek balance, we tend to start losing our ability to connect certain things. Now, and I'm speaking specifically about work-life balance, right? So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this work-life balance myth. So now I'm not saying that we should ban this term, but we should consider what we're doing when we talk about work-life balance. What we're doing is saying that we are not in balance, and that is really a time-based function where we're saying our time is not equally spent on each side of this equation, and quite frankly, it never will be. We will never achieve this mythical balance. What we should be looking for is a way that how does work enhance our life, and how does our life enhance our work, and how do they become one, and how do we become whole at work and life? So I would argue that work-life balance has had some unintended consequences, which is it's created a barrier between work and life. It's created an adversarial relationship between work and life, because whenever we say we need more balance, it's never followed with, or typically it's never followed with, man, I need more balance. I just have to work more. It just doesn't happen that way. It's usually the fact that I need more balance because I'm feeling overworked. And that might be for a lot of reasons. I'm spending too much time at work, which is always going to be a case when we start looking at that. But we really, if we know that what we're doing at work is having a positive impact on our whole life, then maybe it's not that bad from time to time to spend some extra time at work. Likewise, when we feel like we need some time in our personal lives, we should be able to spend that time. So that's going to free us up so that we're more productive and more engaged at work. So it's really, how do these things blend together? And when we look at purely a balance, we put a wall between work and life. And I think we should avoid that and seek greater integration, greater integrity between work and life, or work-life blend. So if we look at technology too, and technology has actually enabled this too. I mean, the more technology has played a role in our life, the more separated we have become. We or less connected. So think about that. And technology, while it's been a great tool for productivity, it's really hurt our ability to become more connected. So we are actually in a very interesting time in really the history of our country and really our world, because now technology, which is super powerful and has always been a productivity tool, is now moving into a tool that can help us with greater connectivity. Even though we're geographically dispersed, we can now connect better. And I'm not talking about just being present connection. I'm talking about having dialogue, really integrating our conversations. And if we can move technology from being productivity focused to connecting human beings, we can now create greater integrity in our life. And that's really the escalation or the evolution of technology, because technology isn't going to stop getting better. Let's see, I just got a notice that said this meeting will end in 10 minutes. I don't know if anybody else got that, but
I'm checking on it. Sorry about that. Keep
okay.
going. You're good.
So the idea of productivity, technology being productivity focused, evolving into connectivity, and really creating integrity in our lives. My main point here is that we are at the early stages of a real change in technology's role in the world. So I look at this as work-life blend, and it's really about, where is our focus? Are we really focusing on blending work and life, or are we living in the way that says, now, whatever I do at work is in conflict with my life? And when we do that, that's actually kind of sad. And I say that because we spend most of our waking time in work or work-related activities. And psychologically, or from a focus perspective, if we're focusing on work as being something that is not part of our life, we're spending almost half of our waking time doing something that isn't enhancing our lives. And I would challenge each and every one of you to change the lens through which you look at work, and hopefully make work something that is enhancing your life, and life will become more fulfilling. But it comes down to this idea of focus, because focus determines our outcomes in life. What we're focusing on is a big deal. We need to be aware of what we're focusing on, because there's two facts that I want to share with you. I call them focus facts. I didn't make these up. These have been tested. They've been proven scientifically. There's a lot of data to support that. But there's two focus facts I want to go over here. And the first one is, the mind can only focus on one thought at a time. So think about this. A lot of things come to mind here. Some might be thinking about multitasking and so forth. But I want to talk to you about this thing called the eye. You know, the eye is an amazing organ. It's an amazing invention, because think about it. We can see with our eye, we can look, we can see like 180-degree peripheral vision. We have the ability to see all of this stuff. But what we don't know is that we can only focus on one thing at a time. So think about this. If you're looking at this screen right now, you can see the whole screen, but are you focusing on one of those zeros or ones behind the eye, or are you focusing on the eye itself? We call this a fixation point, and we all do this. This is where we fixate on a point, and then we're able to register that, and bring that back into our brain, and our brain is able to connect those two dots like a linear straight line, a fixation point, and our mind can only really grasp or focus on one thing at a time. Now, some of you might be saying, well, but I can do a bunch of different things at one time. I can answer a text, I can be looking at Instagram, and I can be working on my CAD drawings or something at the same time, right? And it's not true. What we're doing is we're switching back and forth. And that's called switching cost. There's a cost to doing that. If you've ever been writing a text or an email or something, someone interrupts you, when you come back, there's an adjustment point that you have to go back to find out where you were, what your thought process was. And that's this switching cost that we have. So our mind is constantly moving back and forth for various different things, focusing on various different things. And there's a cost to doing that. We call that flicker focus. And we naturally flicker focus, go back and forth, but we need to be aware that our mind can really only focus on one thing. That's focus fact number one. Focus fact number two is we move toward our focus. So not only do we focus on one thing, when we are focusing on that, we're naturally being pulled towards that. It's like a gravitational pull. We're focusing on it, we're moving towards that. And so that's important. You know, if anybody ever rides bikes or anything like that, if you're riding a bike and you see a rock and you stare at that rock, guess what you're going to hit? You're going to hit that rock, right? So we move towards our focus. And this is important, these two facts, because focus, what we're focusing on, really drives where we're going in life. And so we're going to talk about that. So this idea of focus matters in relation to creating an integrated life, because what we're focusing on, we're going to pursue. And if we're not focused on something, we're going to be pursuing things that we're focusing on that may have been influenced by other people. Here's a quick video here to watch. All right, I'm going to go back. It looks like they upgraded the meeting. I saw that, right, Chandler?
Yeah, sorry about that, Dan. They reworked our system, so we're all good.
All right, we're all good.
No! Harry, no! Don't look at the light! I can't help it. It's so beautiful.
All right, so focus has two edges, right? What we're focusing on can be very, very productive if we know what we're looking at. On the other hand, we may be focusing on something that was put there from somebody else that enticed us, tempted us, and we started pursuing that, and it wasn't what we really wanted. So this idea of what we're focusing on life, we need to be really intentional about it. I created this thing called the focus spectrum, and it recognizes that our focus at any given time is on a spectrum. It's either holding us back, meaning we're paused, we're not moving forward. That's the red side on one extreme. The other side of that is the green side, and that's where we're focusing on our outcomes, learning new results, what will make it work. We're being more focused on others, people-centric, and opportunity. Now think about this. A lot of times, this isn't, by the way, it's not as simple as saying good or bad, positive or negative. That's the natural way to look at red and green. What I'm saying is that we naturally focus on the red side, and it's actually productive to spend time looking at obstacles. It's important in life to understand why things don't work, and we tend to be self-centered. However, if we spend too much time on the red side and never move to focusing on outcomes, we will never adapt our behaviors so that we can pursue the outcomes that we want to create. So if we say we want to do something important in our life, and then all we do is say, well, I can't do it because of this, and my mom didn't treat me well, and my dad didn't do that, and I grew up into this and into that, we start blaming others, that we're never going to reach our potential, which is on the green side of the focus spectrum. So all I'm saying here is that we should be looking at or being aware of where our focus is in virtually every conversation, whatever we're doing at any given time. Ask yourself, is my focus on the red side where it's holding me back or keeping me stagnant? Or am I focusing on the outcomes? And when I focus on the outcomes, I will follow through. I will pursue these things. I will look for ways to overcome obstacles if I'm focusing on the outcomes. So when we enable or when we allow obstacles to overshadow our outcomes, and think about this, we do this all the time in meetings. We sit down in a meeting and we say, here's what I would like to do. And someone says, well, that can't happen because of this. And someone else says, well, and because of this. And we get really, really good at becoming the best in the world. In fact, it becomes a core competency within the organization that says we are the best at figuring out what won't work. And we never figure out how to overcome those obstacles. So be aware of your individual focus. Is it on the red side or the green side? Is it moving me forward or holding me back? Be aware, obviously, of others and then our collective as a group. Is my focus as a group, is our collective focus really accomplishing anything other than just talking about what's wrong? So there's a lot of detail in the focus spectrum that goes underneath that, but that's a quick summary, because when we lack clear focus, we have some challenges, because if we don't have clear focus, then we're going to allow obstacles or other distractions to take over our lives, our meetings, our work. But when we have a clear focus that we're all focusing on, we will move towards that. And that's why we need to focus. We need to be intentional about our focus. It reminds me of this thing called a tumbleweed. Anybody familiar with tumbleweeds? You know, really, they're unanchored. They're susceptible to external influences. They essentially are wandering around with no direction. So our focus is the same way. If we don't anchor our focus, then we are directionless. Then we are susceptible to external influences that may redirect what we're trying to do within our lives and our companies. So a lot of times when you see that somebody's lost, confused, or unsure, it really means that they're lacking the focus. They haven't gotten really clear on their focus because they're being constantly distracted. There's more distractions out there than there are specific items of focus that are really important. I call these focus anchors. So now that we have a focus spectrum, and we want to spend more time, not all of our time, but more time on the green side, how do we anchor our focus down so that we can't be swayed by various different impacts out there or external influences? So now what we need to do is we need to, in order to create focus anchors on the green side, we need to know what our outcomes are. When we are challenged, we need to look for ways that we learn from that. And we need to think about what will make it work. And when things are challenging, rather than say, oh no, this is going to affect me this way, I need to be thinking about how will this affect everybody, being more people-centric. Because when I can start solving problems that will impact others, I become less focused on myself and more focused on others. And that is just more rewarding. And we can focus more on the opportunities that exist out there. So we want to anchor our focus down on clear outcomes that are tangible so that we can follow that focus towards what we want. However, if we don't have clear outcomes in our life and in our work, we're going to let somebody else determine what they want us to focus on. And that is generally not fulfilling. That's more like the tumbleweed. So this is that house that I shared that burned. That burned a couple years ago, and it was rebuilt. And what they did is they got together and they created a clear plan, and that plan became a focus anchor, and the outcome they were focusing on was rebuilding this house to look like this. So that plan became a focus anchor, which then drove actions of many people in order to achieve a clear purpose and restore those sticks and bricks back to their intended purpose. So everything is integrated together so that this home is pursuing or reaching its potential. And that's what we should be doing in our lives. This idea of potential, so let's drill to this for a second. So this idea of potential is pretty interesting. So if we look at what is your potential, think about it. What is your potential over life? What can you accomplish if you're completely aligned on clear focus, clear outcomes, and you start leveraging other areas of your life to say, hey, how do my relationships, my wellness, my work, and my personal interest help me pursue my potential, right? So think about that. Usually we say, how do I be the best I can at work? And then we say, got these relationships at home, I hope they work out. You know, what about my personal wellness? Am I really focused on my psychological fit, my physical, my cognitive well-being? And how can work play a role in this? Because these are really all integrated. All of these things are integrated, or we need to have integrity within all of these things so that we can pursue our potential. But unfortunately, it's not that easy. We have these things that are just natural built-in distractions from trying to divert our focus in life. These are external influences. We could call that a lot of things. So some of you might be thinking, yeah, but I go on social media for 6 hours a day. I'm just kidding. Maybe an hour a day. Maybe we go on social media, and I just do that because it makes me relax. But when we get off the social media, we see that, man, all of our friends are doing so well, and I'm so far behind. And now we start questioning what we're doing, and that doesn't really serve as a tool to be relaxed. So these external influences, we also have external influences, how we grew up, our parents, our environment, our teachers, our coaches. These people have all played a role in shaping you today. So who you are today is really a function of your DNA and the things that influenced you along the way externally. And today we need to say these external influences need to be aligning with my potential. But if I don't know what my potential is, I can't choose the external influences that are consistent with the outcomes I want to create. And then we need to look at our internal side. Sometimes we have some certain built-in behaviors that just aren't consistent with who we want to become. So we need to be aware of those. So in order to reach our potential, we need to integrate our relationships, our wellness, our work, our interests, but we also need to be aware that there's red side focus, these things that try to distract us from the external and internal. We kind of get in our own ways, right? So this is an interesting little illustration that says that, you know, we need to live an integrated life, but we also need to be aware of what's going on externally and internally that will keep us from pursuing our potential. We took this framework and built what we call a personal whiteboard, and it looks at all of those things and builds basically a life plan using AI to do that. I'll talk more about that later, because at the end of this talk, I'm going to give you access to an AI interview that will help you build out your personal whiteboard. But let's keep going down this path here. Potential. Again, we talked about this being integrated. So what is our potential? What is my potential if I put all this together? Potential, I call this, define this as being your purpose, your pursuits, and your principles. Purpose, what am I here for? What are my individual pursuits? What am I pursuing? And then what are the principles through which or by which I want to work by? Because we could go pursue something super meaningful, but if we get rid of our principles or our guardrails, it could be very disastrous. So I want to give you a second here to just write down on that worksheet. So if you go to that worksheet, go to the next question, which is question number 3, and just write down what is your potential. And we're going to do this pretty rapidly, so I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to just write down a word or two to talk about what your potential is. So go ahead and do that now, and I'm just going to keep talking because it gets a little weird when it gets really silent. So I'm assuming you're writing down your potential right now. And when we talk about potential, again, purpose, pursuits, and principles. What on earth am I why on earth am I here? What am I going to do in my life? By the way, potential changes over time. My potential when I was 8 years old is different than when I was 16 years old, was different when I was 27 years old, and now it's different now that I'm a little bit older than 27 years old. And that's okay, but we need to write down our potential so that we can create a clear life focus anchor. And this potential becomes your primary focus anchor in life. So hopefully you had a chance to write that down, and I'm going to move on as you go through that, or you had a chance to think about that. But then on the external side, we now know that we have our potential and we can write that down, but man, there's so many things out there trying to get me to do what I don't want to do. And why do I do things that I don't want to do all the time? And I don't know if I'm not the only one that does that. I know there's a lot of times I do a lot of things. I go, why did I do that? And it's because I've been influenced externally a lot of times. Now think about this. I did a little bit of number checking, and the total marketing and advertising dollars spent in the US in 2010 was $144 billion. So that's the US total marketing and advertising dollars, basically trying to get you to do something that you don't at the time think you should do or know that you should do it. That number grew to 300 billion in 2023. So more than doubling the amount of dollars spent in marketing and advertising over roughly a 13-year period. So there is $300 billion and more, because some of this is not paid, trying to get you to do something that may not be consistent with your potential. But if you don't know what your potential is and you're not anchoring your focus on your potential, these external influences are going to take your focus away from what's meaningful for you. So that's the power on the external side. So going forward, external influences, we need to be aware of what's influencing us, what's got our ear, because what has our ear has our mind, has our actions, because we follow our focus. And if someone can successfully divert your focus to their product, or in a social media perspective, if they can divert your focus to make you want to be more like them, then you have now lost sight of your focus anchor, and the game is won or lost. Won on their part, lost on your part. So having the clear focus anchor in your potential allows you to anchor your focus down so you're not susceptible to these external influences. And then another influence, by the way, I put in here is your inspiration, what inspires you. So now I'm going to go down to the next part of this, which is internal. So on the internal side, we have some DNA, things we were born with. Some of these things are awesome. Some of these things aren't so awesome. So there's certain things inside of us. We call these attributes. We have a whole series of attributes that make us who we are today. Those attributes play a role in helping us pursue our potential. We need to know what attributes are helping us get to where we want to go in life and who we want to become. But at the same time, we need to be aware of those attributes that become shadows in our life. And those shadows are attached to us. They usually come on when the light's shining on us, and they're not always keeping us, or they're definitely not helping us pursue our potential. For example, I played football for several years. And on the football field, I was rewarded. I started playing, I think, around 7 or 8 years old, football in pads. And I played through college. And I was always celebrated, rewarded for yelling, for screaming, and knocking the heck out of the person across from me. That was something that was ingrained in me externally, but it became, because a lot of these external influences become internal attributes over time. So I was rewarded. It's this conversion process. But in the professional world, those types of attributes, being hyper competitive, being able to take control and just knocking people over, not a good idea in the professional world. That's an extreme example, but we have a lot of micro tendencies that exist that we tend to let out when things are tough, that are inconsistent with us pursuing our potential. And those are internal shadows. So I have a few shadows. Some of those I'm just really sensitive. You know, people, when they say something, it kind of gets me upset sometimes. And I wrote that down as being one of my shadows that hurts my ability from achieving who I want to become. So take a second here, and I'm going to continue to talk, to write down a couple shadows. These aren't weaknesses, because these attributes actually help us in certain situations. But in many situations today, as we grow and mature, they become shadows and they hold us back. So hopefully you're writing down 1 or 2 shadows that is an attribute that is holding you back, keeping you from pursuing your potential. And again, it's not a weakness. It can be a weakness. It may have been a strength, because what got us here won't get us there. That saying that says, what got you here won't get you there. So there's certain things in our life that we need to release in order to get what we're looking for or pursue our potential. So next thing here is relationships. So just talking about relationships, in order to pursue our potential, it's most likely going to be achieved by engaging people and working either together or allowing people to help us get to where we want to get to. So who are the relationships, and what are you looking for from relationships to help you and help them pursue their potential. So I look at this as a progression where we need to be looking at various different lenses in our life. Relationships is one of them, and I believe this is the most important thing because we are here in order to, in my opinion, create greater relationships and help those around us. So at the top of this focus, relationships, we look at this as once we know what we're focusing on, then we create the outcomes, and then we can have actions to follow. So here on that next question, and the next question is what relationships will enable you to reach your potential? So just jot down a couple names or think of a couple names. Who are the most important people in your lives? And jot those names down. And are you focused on building a better relationship with them? And I'm not saying write this now, just write down the names now. So what are you focusing on in order to build a better relationship? Because a lot of times what happens is those that are closest to us are the ones we're not trying to build better relationships with. When intuitively we know these are the people we know, like, and trust and love, yet we don't have as much energy to build better relationships with them. How does work help me build a better relationship with my spouse, my significant other, my friends, and so forth? So just be aware these relationships are really the power of creating an integrated life. So hopefully you jot down a name or two there. And then the last one here I want to talk about is just work. So we have several of these we call focus lenses: relationships, wellness, work, and interest. But I'm only giving you a chance to jot down some notes on relationships and now work. So think about work, because a lot of times, again, we're going back to that work-life blend or work-life balance. We tend to think of work as being adversarial and standing in the way to create better relationships. Work typically isn't viewed as a place where we create better mental and psychological well-being. A lot of times we blame our physical shortfalls on working too much. And work was really this dumping ground for a lot of the problems we have in life. And I would argue if you just took a second, if you took work out, do you really think that you would be that much better off? There's a lot of studies that show, particularly with lottery owners, that their life doesn't improve. In fact, it gets worse. When you take work and they are given the things that work provides, that we think work is there to provide, which is money, when they're given that, life isn't quite as fulfilling. So work plays a meaningful role in creating greater connections. How do you at work create focus on the relationships at work so that you can build a better life? So next question for you on your worksheet is to drop down and say, what must you focus on at work to pursue your potential and improve relationships? Now go ahead and write that, and just like before, I'm going to continue to talk because it gets a little weird when it's silent on this call here. So speaking of the relationship side and work, how does work, again, you most likely spend between a third and a half of your waking time at this thing we call work. And it's not just about work, because at work, we establish meaningful relationships. At work, we find goals that help us overcome things. At work, we work together with other people to solve problems. And when we solve these problems, we feel a sense of fulfillment. So this work is this unbelievable, strong, and meaningful place to practice all these lifelong skills to help us get better, because most of the stuff that I learned after really 21 years old, I learned from work. And if I took this idea that what happens at work doesn't happen at home, I would be half or less than half the person I am today, because work taught me about my ability to be patient. Work taught me about my ability to listen to others. My work taught me to be considerate to others. It helped me in all these ways that also played a role in how I treated my spouse, my kids, and also in my community. So work can be an incredible laboratory and a way to create better relationships if we're pursuing an integrated life. So with that, how can AI help me pursue my potential? So remember, I had that slide earlier, and that slide said that we are in really a dramatic shift in technology, where technology historically has been just a productivity tool. And now how does AI actually help us become more connected so I can pursue my potential. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. So I'm going to show you in the background, there's going to be a computer screen that's running through a process. And I'm going to be talking over that. But what the process is doing is the computer is really powered by AI, and specifically conversational AI. And conversational AI, this conversational AI, we call it fusion, is asking questions about somebody's life. Because really, work is not just about work, it's how does work integrate into all areas of our life. So wouldn't it be cool if you had access to something or someone that would interview about your whole life? And now what we can do with AI is we can take a professional, trained coach or consultant and ask questions about your life, confidentially, by the way, about your life, so that you can find out what it is, what your potential is, what meaningful relationships you want to pursue, how does work impact these things, the external impact. So in the background, you're going to see this conversational AI asking a series of questions, and as it does, I'll be talking over that. So here, so you see that right at the top there, it's asking questions about the potential. It asks a question, the person then types the answer, so presumably you would be typing a series of answers. Then it asks the next question, and the next question is dynamic, by the way. So when I say dynamic, many of you might be going, oh yeah, that's a questionnaire. The questions are canned, and it just goes and asks canned questions. It's asking me the same questions as it is somebody else, and that's not conversational AI. This AI will ask you a question to tell me, say, hey, what is your purpose in life? And from that, now the whole conversation changes. Once you answer that one way, the AI goes, that's pretty interesting. Let me dig a little deeper into that topic, and it'll start asking you specific things about what you identified as your potential. We call this layering questions, going deeper behind the answer, you know, the why behind the why. So the AI has the ability to act as a professional coach or consultant to dig deeper to find what's really meaningful for you in your life, so that you can get really clear and start building focus anchors. Because if the AI can ask questions to help you understand what your potential is, now you have that overarching highest potential or focus anchor. So the AI goes through this process, starts asking questions. Here it was asking questions about potential, and then it'll kind of move through that mix. Yeah, I went through some of those. Here are some external questions, and now it's moving into some relational questions. So tell me some various different relational questions. And from these answers that you provide, it starts asking deeper and more meaningful questions. So this is about relationships, not just work relationships, by the way, all relationships, because we all need to have good, positive relationships in all aspects of our life. It also asks questions around work and so forth. So you see what this AI is doing is asking questions to help understand better what it is in your life, what your potential is, what your focus on work, what your focus on various different things in life that are meaningful. It asks you about your external influences, your internal attributes and shadows, to help you understand this. In our case, this is all confidential, by the way. It's not an HR management tool. A lot of people are saying, well, how do we get this into the HR team? No. This is about helping employees pursue what's important in their lives. So at the end of this, we'll give you an access to this, and you can do this. It won't end up in anyone's hands other than yourselves. So it's confidential. It won't be seen by anybody at HR. This is to help you pursue your life potential, recognizing that in order for you to be the best you at work, you need to be the best you in all aspects of your life. So after you complete that AI interview, that's all words. It then takes that, let me go back. And right about here, sorry about that. Let's see. I hit the wrong button, sorry about that. So, we'll skip that. Let's see if I can get there. Okay, yeah, so what it does here is it actually creates what's called a personal whiteboard, and that's the personal whiteboard right there. And so from your interview, it will create a personal whiteboard for you. So you're just having a conversation with an AI bot. It takes all that information and builds what we call a personal whiteboard. Now, this personal whiteboard is important because it now is giving you all the necessary focus anchors in your life, your potential. It's giving you awareness of what's influencing you, what inspires you. It's giving you awareness around your internal attributes, your shadows. It's saying, what do you want to focus on your relationships, wellness, work, and your interests? What outcomes do you want to create? All based on a pretty simple interview. It builds this personal whiteboard, which helps you get clear on your focus anchors across the board here. So why AI? And we're getting close to the end here. So really, AI gives us the ability to reach everyone. So having the ability of a professional coach have a conversation about your life pursuits typically doesn't happen in a business context at work, but it is very valuable in order to create a greater unity at work. So it reaches everyone because we can bottle it up. It gives you advanced guidance to everyone in the company. It gives you individually growth potential at work and at home, and it integrates our work and life. And that's what I think is important. So this wasn't accessible to people just a year ago, and now it's accessible so that you can really pursue personal fulfillment in the workplace can be more impactful. So that's where the AI piece comes into this. It gives us much greater access across the board. So now let's end where we started. And the problem, generally, we lack a life of integrity. The solution is blending work and life. And we went through a process on how we blend work, which is really creating clear focus anchors on our potential, and then aligning our lives, our influences around that, and then integrating our pursuits, meaning our pursuits at work, at home, our relationships, our wellness, psychologically, integrating all these things, knowing that they're all complementary and not in conflict, so that we can have greater fulfillment in life. And now we'll go ahead and check on the questions here. But before we do, I want to outline a process. If you guys want to go through an AI-based interview that will take about 15 minutes, this little this icon right here, which is then supported by this link on the bottom here where it says www Blendification app interview. That's an interview. If you go to that at any time, you'll be able to take a 15-20 minute little AI personal 360 interview. And it'll ask you a series of questions. From that, there's an AI process. From that, you would then schedule a 15-minute personal whiteboard conversion guide. So essentially, you go through this process, go through the AI interview, then you schedule a 15-minute, and we will send you, you'll get a link to schedule that meeting. And then during that meeting, we will convert your interview into a personal whiteboard. And then from that, you can then, like I said, go build a life of integrity. So that's the next action step. If you want to do that, copy that down, go through that. It's optimized for your desktop. It's not as great on your mobile. You can still do it on your mobile, but ultimately go through that 15-minute interview, schedule a time. We'll convert it to a life plan for you, and it'll be confidential across the board. So with that said, I'm going to take screen share off, or actually we can open it up for questions. We still have a few minutes for questions. Are there, oh, we do have chat. I'm going to just pull this up here, chat here. Let's see. All right, nothing on there. Are there any questions that are coming up? What if I said everybody take off their mute? So I taught a class, by the way. I taught a class. I teach at CU Boulder, and I don't allow people to be on mute because that extra step to unmute you keeps people from asking questions. So can we get any questions, comments, or anything from anybody here? But anything out there? David.
How did you kind of arrive at this system? I mean, it seems like there are a lot of good principles in what you're saying. Kind of what was something in your life that led you to this?
Yeah, going back, so for me personally, You guys are all from Georgia. I'm from the state a little bit south of you, called Florida. If you're any Georgia Bulldog fans there, I'm not a Florida Gator. I went to UCF, but when I grew up, I grew up in a bad town. It wasn't I shouldn't say bad. It wasn't what you would consider a great town, and most of the people I grew up with never really got out of that town. Um, so I, for some reason, got out of that town, and when I went to work in a professional setting, I was amazed at how much they were investing in me and how much that enhanced my life. Once I went through a whole career, my career was first in banking and then in hospitality and real estate. When I started consulting over a decade ago, I realized that my pursuit in life was going to recognize that how work played a positive role in my overall life. And then I basically built this platform on this. So this was really, this is 20 years or more in the making based on a lot of experiences, with the assumption that work, I would be a fraction of who I am today if it wasn't for my work influencing me and pointing me in the right direction. And I always wondered that, man, not everybody gets that opportunity, because not everybody gets to be in a professional role where somebody invests hundreds of thousands of dollars in growth with you. So I said, we've got to figure this out so everybody, regardless of where they are in the organization, can get this benefit. So hopefully that answers your question, David.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway point for me is, I think, just thinking about how work and life outside of work can be complementary and not in conflict. It's something I wrote down that I think is helpful. I think, there's definitely a variety of perspectives, and I think if we're always going to try to optimize one thing, but I don't know. I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate your thoughts and providing this tool for us.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. The Next week I'm doing one. So this same process, I mentioned personal whiteboard in there. Next week for ACEC Georgia, we're doing the same thing, but looking at it through the lens of the company and using what we call a strategy whiteboard, and enabling everybody in the organization to do an interview, an AI-based interview that contributes towards the future direction of the company. So it's a similar structure around creating a more blended or an integrated work, but using the lens of the workplace. So ultimately we have two paths, a personal path and a company path. And today we focused on the personal side, which Chandler and I talked about this earlier. Man, if we have to acknowledge that life is completely integrated, and work should be enhancing our life, not standing in the way. Hopefully you guys took away some things. If you have any questions at all, my email, I think, is on the bottom of that worksheet too, or you can ask Chandler. Email me. Go ahead and work through that personal interview, and then we'll schedule a meeting and spend 15 minutes going through it. There's so much more that we couldn't cover today, but I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan, and thank you all for joining us. Everyone online will be receiving a follow-up email that has a PDH form and a recording if you want to refer back to today's meeting. And I'll send Dan's email as well, so you guys have it. But thank you again so much for joining us. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day.